This building is sprinkler protected. I can use 1.2 kilowatts per square metre carpet, can't I? Well, this is a question about C1.10 floor coverings, but it's relevant to more than just that, and you'll see why in a minute. So let's say we're checking carpet in a Class 2 Sollock unit, sprinklered building. 1.2 kilowatts per square metre carpet is okay, isn't it? Well, C1.10 controls fire hazard properties, and for floor coverings it sends you to Specification C1.10 Clause 3. And Table 2 in Clause 3 has a series of minimum values for the floor covering's critical radiant flux. A lower value is less stringent than a higher value, and a lower value is allowed when there's less risk, such as when your building is sprinkler protected, because the sprinklers are going to control any fire that does occur. And so as you can see, more often than not, 1.2 kilowatts per square metre is an appropriate critical radiant flux for most floor coverings in a sprinkler protected building, such as in our Class 2 sole occupancy unit. It's not uncommon for a sprinkler protected building to receive concessions because sprinkler protection mitigates against a lot of hazards. Except Table 2 doesn't look exactly like this. I have left something out because I adjusted the top row. Now, to be fair, it looked like the previous slide for many years until the FPAA 101D and 101H sprinkler systems were introduced in 2019. The NCC often permits concessions for sprinkler protected buildings or has requirements related to a sprinkler system. But to get those concessions or have those requirements apply, the sprinkler systems need to have a very high level of reliability. Now, the 101H and 101D systems are new, and evidence hasn't been developed to show that the FPAA systems are suitable. Therefore, they are excluded here in Table 2. For the majority of concessions for sprinkler protected buildings, you'll see text in brackets like you see in the first row here, other than an FPAA 101D or FPAA 101H system. So that means you need to use the 2118 systems in those circumstances. Now, it's not always the case. There are some instances where the concession can apply to an FPAA sprinkler protected building. And here they are. D1.3, where you get an extra story before you have to fire isolate your stair. If you sprinkle your building, that concession applies for an FPAA 101H system, but not the D system. Same for D112, where your non-required stairway, ramp or escalator can connect 3 stories in a sprinkler protected building. D221, operation of latch, that's where you have a concession from the latch requirements if your sprinkler system automatically unlocks the door. Now, this one is interesting. It's related to a few other provisions, and that's where the H system is counted, but the D system isn't. So C3.5 and C3.6, which are about automatically closing a fire door when the sprinkler system is activated, the D system doesn't work, but the H system does. Because a sprinkler relay triggers when water flows through the system after a head activates. And that's fine because in your conventional sprinkler system and in the FPAA 101H system, any water in the system stays still until a sprinkler head is activated. And that's a good time to start the alarm or close the fire doors or unlock the egress doors and do everything that a building needs to do in fire mode. However, your FPAA 101D system looks like this. Within each SOU, the system supplies a toilet system. This is how the system is tested. When the toilet doesn't work, the owner or the tenant calls a plumber. The plumber comes to find the problem and finds the problem in the sprinkler system. Now, this means there's always going to be water flowing through the system, and so we don't want the exit doors to unlock every time somebody flushes the toilet. So that's why the D system isn't used for the D221 concession. It does apply to the concession for fire hydrants, where you can place your hydrant within 10 metres of a building which has been sprinkler protected. But in Spec E 2.2, Clause 3, last example there, only the H system works for that concession, where you don't need an alarm in the kitchen or corridor if you have a sprinkler. Over in Clauses 4 and 5, neither sprinkler types apply in lieu of smoke detectors. Of course, Specification E1.5A Clause 3 has concessions that do apply for the D and H systems, such as reduced FRLs and increased travel distances. Now, before I leave this slide, I want to say that this is not an exhaustive list. There are plenty of examples in the NCC where there's a red cross in both columns. For instance, in C2.6, relating to spandrel protection, when you don't have to have spandrels if your building is sprinkler protected. neither the D or H systems work for that concession. What this list is showing you is where either the D or H systems are acceptable in the deemed to satisfy provisions for the purposes of a concession or a provision. So the take-home message is to understand the FPAA systems are unique sprinkler systems and so are treated differently from the traditional 2118 systems, which is why your carpet in the units needs to have a critical radiant flux of 2.2 kilowatts per square metre or better if you have an FPAA system.